you also, I think you answered fan mail, right? Or you opened fan mail?
I opened,
or you
yes.
received the mail?
Yes. You know, a lot of mail came in specifically to Ed Beach or Max Cole or Louise Clay, to the on-air people, or to shows. So those went into show boxes. But there was a lot of mail that just came in to WRVR from fans. Some of those fans had questions, like, can I get that tape? Or what was that piece of music that you played? So I knew where those went. But to me, it was a real education in my first education about what public radio meant to an audience, because something else was going on that that listeners felt that this was somehow speaking directly to them, that this was their station. And in fact, there were, I can't give you the exact summers, but there were times when, I mean, people listen to public radio today and there are fundraising announcements from corporations and businesses that support public radio stations, and you hear those all the time. WRVR didn't have those. As far as I know, maybe once or twice. I don't know that RVR ever used its own air to raise money, but I know there was a WRVR picnic with a newsman named, I want to say Arthur Alpert. I don't know why I remember that. But a couple hundred people showed up to have a picnic with the WRVR staff members and just enjoy meeting the people they had heard on the radio. And in reading the mail, I understood that there were very smart people who were listening, and they had as much information as we did about the music or the news. I learned that, I mean, this is way before social media, I'm talking about early 1970s, that people got annoyed at what they heard on the radio, but for the most part, people loved it, and it meant a lot to them. There wasn't a lot of classical music on at the time. Station WNCN was a commercial station. WNYC aired classical music, and I think the Columbia station KCR did. I'm not sure what WFUV was doing. The city at one point had, I mean, I want to say 30s and 40s, like a dozen jazz stations. There was, when RVR was playing jazz, there was not a lot of jazz left in the city. I don't know that BGO in Newark was playing jazz at the time. I don't know. But to people who love jazz, this was very special. And it was very clear in reading the mail that people had a real connection to the station. The station probably could have used that to raise money, but I think because it was licensed to the Riverside Church, the church didn't feel it was the right thing to do it, to ask for money from listeners at the time. And fundraising, as I said, was not what it was today at all. Let's see what else I remember. What else do you want to know?
Well, could you tell me a little bit more about that jazz programming and about Ed Beach and about Max Cole and what they were like and your relationship to them?
Yeah. So the main announcers, I mean, I don't think we'd ever call them disc jockeys, but I guess they were disc jockeys, but we called them announcers. So Max Cole was sort of the main voice of the station, and he had a deep, rich voice, and did both classical music and jazz announcing. He knew both. I can't remember typing something jazz with Max Cole, but he did both classical music announcing. So, I mean, they played, you know, all different kinds of jazz, except for soft jazz. I mean, I don't think that RVR, I don't know that there was much soft jazz at the time. But, you know, Max was the closest thing to jazz presented as classical music, as American classical music. And he had a very commanding voice, as I said, and deep knowledge. And his shows, I don't remember that they were scripted. I mean, there were two kinds of jazz shows. One was DJing, where an announcer sat in the booth and played records, but another was a taped show, where I think things were more scripted, more thematic, and I think the most famous show that came out of WRVR was Just Jazz with Ed Beach. And whereas Max spoke the way a classical music announcer would, these were very nice guys. Ed was sort of a hipster. Ed was like the guy you would imagine at the clubs in the village, snapping his fingers. I mean, to me, he was an older gentleman. I don't know how much older he was, but he was considered sort of a holy person. Like, it was very clear, you just didn't walk up to him and chat. If he looked at you and looked like he wanted to talk, but mostly he sat back in his office, had a turntable by his desk. Behind him were, I don't know, 50 years of jazz records, recordings, plus his tapes. And his most famous show was Just Jazz with Ed Beach, in which he dived very deeply into an artist. So there were shows on Duke Ellington. There were shows on Vince Guaraldi. There was Mary Lou Williams, the great singers. And he did this for years and years. Now, my responsibility was knowing the exact title of the show, the number of the show, and the exact length of the show. But he was meticulous. So if the show had to be 59 minutes and 30 seconds, it probably was 59 minutes and 30 seconds or 29 seconds. I remember now that any time Ed opened the microphone, I don't know if this happened automatically, he may have had to start the tape, but when he opened the mic, there was always a jazz bed underneath him. And somebody, I mean, it's probably on the internet machine somewhere, somebody probably knows the music that was underneath it. But it was it sort of made him special. I mean, most DJs in between the music, the songs, there was silence, or this dark black silence. Ed always had this music bed underneath him. So it was one of his signatures. But he had this deep voice. I can't do it. But he knew how to pause, and there were great pauses. But his knowledge was encyclopedic in terms of he knew everything about jazz. And I knew nothing about jazz, so I listened and I learned. Occasionally I would ask a question. And when you went back, I'm doing this because his office was around this door around the corner. He would not only listen to everything he was going to play before he played it, he retimed everything. I mean, all these discs, if you look at the back, most of them had timings. Many times they were not the timings. But he made sure if the cut said 7 minutes, 20 seconds, if it was 7:18, on all of his records, and I used to have to refile records, although God forbid you refiled a record incorrectly, there was hell to pay. You could see Ed's handwriting. You could see his notation that the time was different. So it was meticulous work. And for the most part, people left him alone. As I say, he was considered like a holy figure. So my memory is if they were changing formats or they were changing his time, it's like it was a big deal to go to him and say, we're moving your show, or we're doing something, or we're adding a promo. Like, you didn't want to be there for that moment. Because he was very serious. And I don't know if I told you this story, but after my first summer, I was saying goodbye because I was going back to school. And I went around to thank people because the summer of 1969 had been an amazing summer. I mean, I didn't go to summer camp. I went to Camp RVR. And he said, young man, I see you like this. I I said, I love it here. He goes, I don't know if you should go into the business. And I was like, why? Because you don't have a voice. I mean, at the time, the males who succeeded had these really deep, rich voices. And I still probably sounded like I was from Bergenfield, New Jersey, and my voice is in the mid-high range. And I was really disappointed. Taking the subway or the bus back up to the George Washington Bridge, I think I could almost remember feeling the embarrassment, the redness on my face. Here was the great Ed Beach telling me I didn't belong at a place where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. I loved it. And I remember crossing the George Washington Bridge, looking out at the church, at the Riverside church, and thinking, this is very much unlike me to even defend myself. 17 years old, I said, that's not what I said. I'm cleaning up the story. In my mind, though, I said, I'm going to outlast. I'm going to do this. I love this, and he's not going to tell me. I mean, it was a good warning but I knew it when I got to my college radio station, because all the DJs had these big, deep voices. And even the women on the air had deeper voices than me. But I wasn't angry at Ed. I was just embarrassed. And it was good, because it meant to me that even though I was a DJ at my college radio station, I sort of knew with his voice in my head that I had to be good at other things. So I made sure I was good at other things. Now, we're talking in 2022. This happened in the summer of 1969. I remember it pretty clearly, so it obviously had a great deal of meaning to me, but mostly because I respected him so much. There were other people who did jazz at the station. Van Jay did a jazz show, and I think he played more contemporary jazz. A Young Lord, which was an activist Puerto Rican group. One of the heads of the Young Lord was Felipe Luciano, and he did a show, I think, called Latin Jazz with Felipe Luciano. There were other DJs and announcers. If you jog my memory, I might remember typing...
Father O'Connor.
Oh, of course. Oh, the jazz priest, Father Norman J. O'Connor. Right. I only met him a couple of times, and I know he would always go to talk to Beach if he was in the station. But I don't know when he recorded. I don't remember him actually. I don't remember watching him. Maybe once I watched him record a show. And I didn't know, is he a minister or a priest?
He's a priest.
A priest? I didn't know priests knew jazz or could be on the radio. You grew up in New Jersey, what do you know? It's like, so I thought, what a strange, remarkable person. And he had a beautiful voice, a mellifluous voice. It probably came from doing sermons, but I don't know if that was on every day or every week. But yes, he was known. I think he was known as the jazz priest, and he certainly had taste. There was music that he adored and he felt the audience could enjoy. But I also felt that in some way, playing jazz was a spiritual experience for him, or part of his mission, that I think he thought that jazz was actually making lives better in the way a priest would. Mm-hmm. That may be a false memory, but I remember thinking it at the time when I was listening to the tapes, because I'd always have to listen to these tapes for various reasons, to do promos or to time where the break was, or to put leader tape where the break was, whatever the tapes needed. So I was listening to these shows. And he certainly was hip, but he certainly was spiritual at the same time.